They say some people leave your life like a sunset, quiet, slow, gentle, while others disappear like lightning, without warning, leaving you blinking at the empty space they once filled. But no one tells you what to do when the lightning returns years later, brighter, unexpected, and holding secrets that could shatter the world you've rebuilt. That's what happened to Daniel, the single dad who had finally learned how to breathe again when he walked into a wedding and saw the one woman he never thought he'd see again. His first love. The woman who had promised forever. The woman he believed had abandoned him. And the woman he was now falling for all over again, without knowing she was a billionaire who had already started falling fast for him. Chapter 1 begins when life finally looks peaceful for Daniel, but peace has a way of cracking when the past walks in wearing a midnight blue gown. Daniel had never been the kind of man who thought he'd end up raising a child alone, but life didn't follow anyone's plans. His wife, Anna, had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden illness, leaving him with their daughter, Emma, who was only 5 at the time and terrified of a world without her mother. Daniel had tried to hold himself together for her sake, but grief had a way of turning every day into a mountain. At 32, he felt older than he was, not because of age but because of the weight he carried quietly in his chest. Yet now, after years of stumbling and learning and healing, he finally felt settled. He worked as a carpenter, restoring old furniture and crafting custom pieces in a small workshop behind his home. Emma, now 8, was his sunshine, a gentle, artistic girl who loved drawing butterflies on scraps of sandpaper and giggled at the sound of wood being sawed. They lived modestly, but they lived with love, and that was more than many people in the world could say. When Daniel's younger sister, Nora, told him she wanted him and Emma at her best friend's wedding, he didn't think much of it. He agreed because Nora had been his anchor through his darkest nights, and he wanted to support her. What he didn't expect was that the wedding would be the place where fate would wake up from its long sleep. From the moment he stepped into the decorated hall, he felt a shift in the air, something he couldn't name, something that made his heartbeat flicker strangely. The wedding was classy but warm, filled with candlelit tables, soft music, and guests wrapped in joy. Emma twirled in her peach-colored dress, her curls bouncing, making Daniel smile despite the faint ache weddings always stirred in him. He didn't notice her at first. He only noticed the sudden hush that fell across a few nearby guests, the way some of them straightened as if royalty had entered the room. Daniel followed their gaze, and that was when his breath left him completely. She stood across the hall, talking to the bride, her soft brown hair falling down her back, her smile warm and familiar, as if 8 years hadn't passed since he had last seen it. Lena. His Lena. His first love. The girl he had planned a whole future with before she vanished from his life without explanation, breaking him in ways no one noticed because he had been too proud to bleed publicly. His heart thudded against his ribs. A part of him, the part he had buried under work and fatherhood and loss, stirred painfully. He wanted to look away, to pretend this wasn't happening, but he couldn't. She was the same, and yet not. There was a confidence in her posture, a grace in how she carried herself. She looked like a woman who had walked through storms and come out glittering. Before he could decide whether to escape or stay, Lena turned her head, and their eyes locked. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lena's smile faded slowly, replaced by a look Daniel couldn't read: shock, fear, longing, regret, all of it flickering through her in the span of a heartbeat. She excused herself from the bride and took a hesitant step forward, as if she wasn't sure whether he would welcome her or run. Daniel felt Emma tug on his hand. "Daddy? Who's that lady looking at you like she knows you?" He swallowed, unprepared for any of this. "Someone from a long time ago," he murmured. As Lena approached, the world narrowed down to the space between them. She stopped just a foot away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi, Daniel." His name on her lips felt like a memory being shaken awake. "Lena," he replied, his tone colder than he intended. "It's been a long time." She flinched, the smallest motion, but he saw it. She looked down briefly, gathering herself before looking back into his eyes. "I didn't expect you to be here," she said softly. "Same," he answered. "Life is full of surprises, I guess." But the truth was, this didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like a wound reopening. Lena glanced at Emma, and her expression softened. "She's beautiful," she said, her voice trembling. "She looks like you." Emma smiled shyly. "Thank you." Daniel cleared his throat, suddenly nervous, protective, confused. "This is my daughter, Emma." For a second, just a second, Lena's face broke. Not in jealousy, not in disappointment, but in something far deeper, far more painful. Daniel almost asked if she was all right before she plastered on a soft smile again. "It's nice to meet you, Emma." The little girl looked between them curiously. "Did you know my dad when he was young?" Lena let out a soft breath. "Yes," she said. "I knew him very, very well." Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, the old ache, the old anger. He didn't want to have this conversation in the middle of a wedding hall. Not now. Not with Emma watching. He began, but Lena gently touched his arm. "Please," she said. "Just give me a moment later. There's so much I need to explain." His jaw tightened. He didn't want explanations. He didn't want the past digging its way back into the life he had finally stabilized. Yet the look in her eyes, full of sincerity, fear, and something like pleading, made him pause. "Later," he said stiffly. "Not now." She nodded, relief and sorrow mixing in her expression. "Thank you." But as Lena walked away, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the story he thought had ended long ago was only beginning again, and this time, he wasn't sure he was ready for the truth. Chapter 2 begins after Lena reveals the secret she has carried for years. The reception was loud, joyful, bright, completely opposite from the storm Daniel felt brewing inside him. Emma danced with a group of kids while Daniel stood near the back, trying to breathe normally. He had hoped that whatever conversation Lena wanted to have would be brief. Simple. Maybe an apology, maybe a reason enough to close the door forever, but the moment she approached him again after dinner, he knew it wouldn't be simple. "Can we talk outside?" she asked quietly, yet he nodded reluctantly, following her out into the garden lit with soft golden lanterns. The air was cool, the kind that carried the scent of flowers and the weight of things unsaid. Lena stood in front of him, wringing her hands slightly, just like she used to when she was nervous. But now she wasn't a college girl afraid of failing an exam. She was a woman trembling at the thought of losing whatever fragile chance she still had with him. "I owe you the truth," she began. "I owe you everything I never said." Daniel folded his arms, bracing himself. "Why did you disappear, Lena? Without a call, without a message, nothing. One day we were planning our future, the next, you were gone." Her lips quivered. "My father," she whispered. "He found out about us. You know, he never liked the idea of me dating someone who wasn't from our world, but you don't know how far he went." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "He had me sent abroad overnight," she said, tears rising. "No phone, no internet, no way to reach you. He told me if I tried to contact you, he would destroy your life, your family's business, your mother's health bills, everything." Daniel felt his breath stop. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she choked. "I left because I was scared he'd hurt you. I thought it would only be for a few months, but he kept extending it. By the time I found a way back into my life, you were married. You were happy. And I didn't want to interfere." His chest tightened painfully. He remembered how broken he had felt after she vanished, the nights he stayed awake wondering what he had done wrong. He had spent years believing she walked away because he wasn't good enough, because love wasn't strong enough. "And you didn't think I deserved to know the truth?" he asked, voice rough. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "I was wrong." Silence hung heavy between them. Daniel turned away, trying to process the years of confusion, the heartbreak, the anger. But what stunned him most was the next word she forced herself to say. "There's more," Lena said. "More you don't know." Daniel looked at her, exhausted. "What now?" "My father passed away 2 years ago. I inherited everything. The companies, the properties, the entire empire." "Daniel, I already figured you're living well," he muttered. "You look different." She shook her head. "Not just well. I'm one of the wealthiest women in the country." Daniel froze. The revelation hit him like a wave. Not because he cared about money, he didn't. But because suddenly, the distance between them felt even larger. She wasn't just someone who had left him behind, she was someone who now belonged to a world he could never touch. "And that's why I didn't want to tell you earlier," she said, tears falling freely. "Because I knew what you'd think. That I've changed. That I'm unreachable. But Daniel, I would give up every dollar if I could rewrite the past. If I could go back to the night I should have run to you instead of being